Hey guys. Tonight we're heading somewhere you definitely didn't ask for. A cramped wooden hut that smells like boiled cabbage, wet fur, and something vaguely medicinal in the worst way. Outside, a dirt path winds through the village, thick with slop and the occasional stray chicken. But you're inside, trembling on a creaky three-legged stool, watching a man with soot under his nails rummage through a leather bag full of sharp, very unsterile objects. He grunts. He's not a doctor, he's not even a barber, but he does own a pair of iron pliers and a reputation for fixing teeth. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're settling in, post your city and local time. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're about to have the worst dental appointment of your life. And that's saying something, because technically, you don't even know what a dentist is. See, it's the Middle Ages. You live in a world where the line between healer and torturer is mostly symbolic, and pain management involves strong drink, crossed fingers, and occasionally passing out in a ditch. There's no such thing as modern dentistry. No anesthesia, no floss, no fluoride, no polite receptionists offering you magazines and a complimentary toothbrush. Instead, there's a man in a greasy wool tunic with a knife he also uses to carve meat, and he's squinting at your swollen jaw like he's mentally measuring how far to twist. You came here because of a toothache, but you're quickly realizing that was mistake number one. Back home, your jaw's been throbbing for days. You've tried all the folk cures, chewing sage, spitting into the fire at midnight, pressing cold iron to your cheek. Nothing worked. Now the pains move behind your eye. Your neighbors told you to see old Joran, the man who pulled out a cow's infected tooth with rope and a prayer. So here you are. Joran gestures for you to open wide. He smells like pickled onions and smoked eel. You do as you're told. He peers inside with a candle stub, muttering something about rot all the way down. Great. That probably means you'll be leaving with fewer teeth than you walked in with. This isn't unusual. In fact, in medieval towns across Europe, people are losing teeth left and right by the time they hit 30. Tooth decay isn't just common, it's practically expected. Diets are carb-heavy, and sugars just starting to show up thanks to trade routes. Combine that with zero dental hygiene and lots of gritty bread that erodes enamel. And it's a perfect storm of mouth misery. But here's the thing, there are no real dentists yet. If you're wealthy, you might have access to someone vaguely educated, maybe a monk who's read an ancient Greek manuscript about humors and extractions. But most people rely on barber surgeons, blacksmiths, or anyone with a steady hand and an iron stomach. These are men and very occasionally women who specialize in bloodletting, amputations, and lancing boils. Pulling teeth is just another box on the gruesome service menu. Joran doesn't ask questions. He doesn't wash his hands. He wraps a rough cloth around your head, jamming something between your molars to steady the target. Then he picks up a tool that looks suspiciously like something used to shoe a horse. You try not to panic. One deep breath, one jerking twist, and your vision goes white. It's a common procedure. One yank, hopefully, and the tooth is out. But if the roots are stubborn, or the tool slips, he'll need to break the tooth into pieces and dig them out one by one. No numbing, just the wet crunch of nerves snapping like dry twigs, and the warm gush of blood flooding your tongue. Medieval dentistry is less about precision and more about enthusiasm. You groan. He stuffs a wad of linen into your mouth to stem the bleeding, then pats your shoulder like you've just given birth to a demon. You'll live, he says cheerfully, unless it festers. Charming. And yes, that is often the actual outcome. The lack of sterilization means many people don't survive long after a routine extraction. Infections travel fast, especially through the soft tissues of the mouth. An abscess can become septic. A minor toothache can kill, and historians still argue whether most medieval dentists knew just how deadly their work really was, or whether they thought a little fever and swelling was just part of the recovery. Outside, children are tossing rocks at a dead rat. Your head is spinning, your mouth tastes like iron, and Joran's already moved on to treating someone else. Looks like they've got a fishhook stuck in their arm. You try to stand, but the room tilts. Your jaw pulses like it has its own heartbeat. You'll survive. Probably. But you're definitely not smiling. Your steps are slow and shuffling now, like you've aged 20 years in the last 10 minutes. Blood is still dripping somewhere inside your mouth, seeping into the rag that tastes like stale mead and old wool. The village street looks the same, muddy, noisy, and completely unimpressed by your suffering. No one rushes to help you. No one even pauses. You're just another person, with a ruined tooth, and a face swelling like a summer melon. You reach your home, collapse onto a straw mattress, and try not to scream every time you swallow. The pain hasn't stopped, not even close. In fact, it's changed, sharper now, as if your mouth is being scraped from the inside out, with a red-hot spoon. You start to wonder if the treatment made things worse. The answer is probably yes. But let's rewind a little. Tooth decay in the Middle Ages isn't a rare problem. It's a chronic, village-wide issue. You live in a world with zero dental education and plenty of starchy, chewy, tough-to-break-down foods. Most people eat thick bread, porridge, dried meat, and legumes. Fresh vegetables are seasonal luxuries, and meat gets preserved with salt so intense it could turn your gums into beef jerky. If you're lucky, you can afford a few spices to mask the taste of whatever's been in your larder too long. The result? Tooth enamel wears down fast, gum disease sets in early, and by your late 20s, you're basically chewing with stumps. A rotten tooth isn't a surprise, it's expected. In fact, you've probably already got several small black spots hiding between your molars, ticking time bombs waiting for the next cold snap or unlucky bite of bone. And when the rot spreads deeper, reaching the pulp, the squishy nerve-filled center, it becomes what we today call a root infection. In medieval terms, that's jaw fire or devil's burrow. Either way, it feels like a tiny demon tap dancing behind your cheekbone. And here's the kicker. There is no known cure, unless, of course, you count strong drink. Wine, ale, or mead, whatever you've got. Alcohol doesn't fix the tooth, but it dulls your awareness of how terrible everything feels. It also thins your blood, so you'll bleed more after an extraction. Win-win. Some herbalists offer concoctions made with cloves, willow bark, or crushed poppy. Others suggest chewing onion or burning chamomile in your mouth. None of this works particularly well. Some of it actually makes things worse. But you do it anyway, because the pain is constant and the smell is horrifying. That's right, rotting teeth reek. The combination of exposed pulp, infected gum, and whatever half-fermented food is trapped in your molars creates a scent so putrid it could wilt wildflowers. You don't know it because everyone else smells that bad too. But people sometimes lean away when you speak. Even your goat gives you side eye. There's no real hygiene culture around the mouth. Washing the face. Sure, washing the inside of your mouth. Practically unheard of. And yet, ironically, people are very aware of their breath. Chronic halitosis is one of the most complained about mouth afflictions in surviving medieval texts. That, and phantom biting, which probably meant nerve pain or jaw misalignment. But back then it was blamed on spirits or imbalance in the humors. Some folks try to prevent decay with rituals. You might be told to spit into a running stream every morning to cast out the worm, or to chew fennel at dawn and bury it in crossroads soil, or to whisper a rhyme to your aching tooth while stroking a black cat's tail. Historians still debate whether these practices were taken seriously or just done out of desperation, but they were certainly common. And if you're lucky, really lucky, your pain goes away for a while. Maybe the infection kills the nerve. Maybe your body fights it off. Or maybe, horrifyingly, the pressure gets so intense that your gum splits open and the abscess drains spontaneously. That's as close to a miracle as medieval mouths get. But in your case, that didn't happen. You wake up in the middle of the night with a jaw that feels like it's trying to explode. The side of your face is ballooned. Your eye won't open fully. You're sweating, shaking, muttering prayers you barely remember. Somewhere inside you, you know this isn't just a bad tooth anymore. This could kill you, and it has killed others. Not just peasants like you, either. Monarchs, bishops, even scholars. One minor infection left untreated, can spread to the brain or the bloodstream. The medical term today is sepsis. Back then, it was just the fever. You wouldn't be the first to die from a toothache. You wouldn't be the last. But of course, none of that matters now. Your only thought is survival. You wrap your face in a hot cloth, soaked in vinegar. You chew on a stick of bark. You whisper to the saints. You pray, not for healing, but for the pain to stop, even if that means joining the ghosts under the churchyard soil. And all this? This is just the beginning of your dental journey. Morning comes, but the sun brings no comfort. Its light slips through the cracks in your shutters and glances off the inflamed swell of your jaw. You sit hunched on your mat, dazed, drooling blood-tinged spit into a wooden bowl. Your face looks like it's hiding a small fruit under the skin, and your left eye's reduced to a squint. You've passed through pain into something quieter and more dangerous. The dull, thudding numbness of infection turning systemic. Your neighbor comes to check on you. She doesn't knock, just barges in, clutching a bundle of herbs and muttering that the tooth devils are dancing again. She's not a trained healer. She's a weaver who once nursed a pig with a broken tusk. Still, she considers herself qualified. She waves a piece of wormwood in front of your face and tells you to bite down. You can't. Your mouth won't close. Time for another professional. But this time, it's not old Juron. You're going to someone even more versatile. The town barber. Now, in today's world, the worst your barber might do is mess up your fringe or forget to blend a fade. But in the Middle Ages, a barber isn't just trimming hair. He's bleeding patients, stitching wounds, setting bones, and yes, pulling teeth. The red and white stripes on modern barber poles. That's not decoration, it's a legacy of blood and bandages. The barber, in your town, operates from a little stall wedged between the tannery and the tavern. You know him mostly as the man who shaved your uncle's scalp after his lice got biblical. He's got quick hands and a permanent frown. When you stumble in, he nods, without asking questions, gestures for you to sit, and grabs a leather pouch from the shelf. Inside is a jumble of steel, bone and rust, his tools. There's a small hook with a twisted end, a pair of pliers that might have been forged in a dragon's forge, and something that looks suspiciously like an oyster shucker. None of them have names. None have ever been cleaned. They glint under the dusty light like relics of some ancient torture rite. Bad one? He asks flatly. You nod. It hurts. He sighs and selects the hook. Tooth extractions in the medieval era are fast because they have to be. The longer the procedure takes, the higher the chance you'll pass out, bleed too much, or thrash around and make things worse. So the barber moves with the brutal efficiency of someone who's pulled dozens of molars while still managing to trim beards and lance boils in the same afternoon. He doesn't numb the area. He doesn't explain. He just goes in. And in goes the hook, jammed between your cheek and the infected tooth. He twists, livers, presses. Your skull lights up like a cathedral candle. There's an audible pop, followed by a sickening crunch. A moment later, your vision tunnels, and the pain floods through your limbs like fire. Then, just like that, it's over. The tooth is out. The barber drops it into a bowl with a wet plink and grunts approvingly. The root is blackened. The tip still oozes something yellow. He hands you a cloth to bite down on, and reaches for a small flask of strong wine, not for you, to clean his hands. Which, in fairness, is more than old Joran ever did. You stagger back outside. It's worth noting that these barber surgeons are technically part of a larger tradition of medical professionals, though many are trained by apprenticeship, not formal education. They're regulated in some cities, completely freelance in others. In larger towns, they might share guild space with physicians, or be hired by monasteries to treat monks. But in most rural areas, they are lone wolves with knives, and tooth extraction is one of their most common tasks. Interestingly, historians still debate whether barber surgeons were genuinely respected or merely tolerated. Some records suggest they were considered essential. Others show them being blamed for spreading disease or botching surgeries. But in a world with no alternatives, they were what you got, and you were grateful. Mostly. Back in your hovel, you rinse your mouth with salt water, boiled if you remembered. You chew on a rag soaked in mead. You lie still. You sleep. And then one day later, your neighbor arrives to tell you about something odd. Apparently, the local butcher is also pulling teeth now. He has strong hands, after all, and he's already used to working with bone and muscle. One less thing to waste. Plus, he's started experimenting with reimplanting teeth pulled from corpses. You stare at her, horrified. They say, she whispers, if you die with all your teeth, it's a sign of divine favor. But if you lose too many, well, it's like your soul's falling apart from the inside out. You try to laugh, but your jaw cracks ominously. In truth, the medieval understanding of oral health is tangled up with spiritual beliefs, folklore, and practical desperation. Teeth are seen not only as tools for eating, but as signs of character, moral decay, or even punishment. A toothache might be interpreted as divine wrath. Losing a tooth might symbolize the loss of power, and pulling one, that's a literal and symbolic purge. So as you sit there, sore and swollen, you realize that you've just taken part in something much older than it looks. A ritual, a punishment, a treatment, a gamble. You survived, for now, but you still have 27 more teeth. Your jaw is beginning to settle, just a bit. The swelling's gone from you look like you tried to swallow a beehive, to maybe you got lightly punched by a saint. You're still sore. Your tongue keeps exploring the cavern where the tooth used to be, and every sip of broth reminds you of nerves that aren't quite sure if they want to keep existing. But there's a new concern blooming among your neighbors, one even more inventive. They've brought you mouthwash, not the fizzy, minty kind, not even something gentle like clove water. No, this is a gnarled clay pot filled with vinegar, crushed mint, ashes, and wait, is that urine? Yes. Yes, it is. Welcome to the charming world of medieval breath freshening. Because while brushing your teeth isn't standard practice, smelling vaguely tolerable still matters. And medieval people, they get creative. Let's talk about what's inside this concoction. Vinegar was used for everything: cooking, preserving, wound cleaning, and now, as a way to chase the rot out of your gums. Crushed mint leaves add a refreshing twist, but also serve a practical purpose. Mint's strong scent is one of the few things capable of temporarily masking the sulfurous horror wafting from a decayed molar. And then there's the ash. Charcoal or burned bones were believed to absorb bad smells, fight infection, and somehow scare the worms away. Ah yes, the worms again. People genuinely believed, for centuries, that toothaches were caused by tiny living creatures, toothworms, burrowing into your molars and chewing away at your nerves. They imagined the pain as squirming, biting, gnawing, and since microscopes didn't exist, no one could prove otherwise. Some physicians swore they had seen these worms crawling out after extractions. Historians still argue whether they were describing bits of dead pulp, tangled nerves, or just seeing what they wanted to see. But here's the kicker. If you thought your breath stunk, and that stink meant you were infected by toothworms, the next step was obvious. Kill them, smoke them, burn them out. That's where some really strange mouthwashes come into play. Some recipes call for garlic steeped in wine, then spat into a fire, symbolically destroying the infection. Others recommend gargling with dog's milk, boiling frog hearts, or yes, human urine. The logic, if you can call it that, was that strong smells drove out stronger smells. If you could outstink the worm, maybe it would leave. Of course, no one knew about bacteria. There was no germ theory, no understanding of microbial decay. But people did notice that wounds cleaned with wine or vinegar fared better than those that weren't. So these odd-smelling concoctions weren't entirely nonsense. They were chaotic early experiments with disinfection. Not ideal, but earnest. And yet, none of these brews actually stop the root problem. They're short-term relief at best. You're still at risk of infection, especially now that you've got an open socket in your gum. The bleeding slowed, but the hole is just sitting there waiting to tat food, dirt, and the occasional fly leg. You try not to think about that. Instead, you swish the mixture around like you're performing a holy rite. It stings, bubbles, you gag, but your neighbor watches proudly, as if she's just passed on a royal secret. Meanwhile, down at the tavern, word is spreading about someone who lost all their teeth last winter and lived to tell the tale. He drinks broth, sucks on boiled oats, and wears a scarf around his head at all times to keep his jaw from falling off. Some say he's cursed, others say he's a pioneer. Toothless living is more common than you'd think, especially among the elderly, or what counts as elderly when the average life expectancy hovers around 40. Tooth decay doesn't discriminate, but poverty speeds it up. People with less access to food variety and less time for superstitions tend to lose teeth faster. By your age, maybe 25, maybe 30, you've already seen friends with gaps so wide they whistle when they talk. And still, no one talks about prevention. Sure, there are a few rudimentary tools floating around. A wealthy noblewoman might own a toothstick, a chewed twig from a tree with antimicrobial bark, like neem or mastic. These were precursors to toothbrushes, often with one end frayed for scrubbing and the other tapered for picking. But you're scraping your teeth with soot and a broken chicken feather because someone once told you it cleans the badness. It doesn't. What it does do is abrade your enamel, widen any existing cavities, and possibly stab you in the gum. But at least it feels like you're doing something. You miss the modern comfort of brushing your teeth while zoning out. You miss floss, though you've never heard of it, and you miss being able to smile without feeling like you're flashing a row of gravestones. Still, you persist. You rinse with the mouthwash, you chew fennel, you avoid smiling too wide. Because in the Middle Ages, a bad tooth isn't just an inconvenience. It's a slow death sentence hiding in your mouth, and you're starting to suspect that even the worst pain you've known so far was only the warm-up act. You're trying to live your life, one cautious bite at a time, but the gap where your tooth used to be is constantly pulling your attention, like a sore spot on your tongue you can't help prodding, even though it hurts every time. The village smells like manure, someone's burning animal bones in the distance, and your jaw has settled into a dull ache that pulses like an angry drum whenever the wind changes. That should be the end of it. You endured the yank. You swished the vinegar pea cocktail. You whispered to Saint Apollonia. But then your cousin shows up, and she's got news. She heard about a new treatment, a way to cure toothache completely. It's guaranteed, proven, revolutionary. You ask what it is. She leans in, lowers her voice, and says, fire. Specifically burning out the worm. You're speechless. Not because you're shocked, but because deep down some part of you was expecting this. This is medieval medicine, after all. If something hurts, it must be alive. And if it's alive and inside you, you'd better kill it before it kills you. So here you are, being escorted to yet another healer, one who carries a heavy iron pin and a small clay lamp filled with oil. He doesn't have a name, people just call him the smoker. Great. That inspires confidence. He examines your jaw and nods sagely. He doesn't ask about your diet, or if you've been rinsing with herbs, or whether the swelling's gone down. No. He asks if you have a favorite saint. That's the only prep you get. Then he lights the lamp, heats the iron pin in the flame until it glows orange, and calmly tells you to lie back and open as wide as you can. What happens next is a mix of alchemy, folklore, and sheer blind panic. He jams the red-hot metal into the rotted cavity of your next aching tooth. Because yes, another one's already gone bad. The smell is immediate and unmistakable. Burning flesh, cooked blood, and something like scorched pork rinds. You convulse, you scream, you nearly bite through your tongue. But the smoker just hums to himself. He believes, like many of his contemporaries, that the toothache is caused by an invisible intruder. If you burn the cavity, fry the worm, in his words, you purify the tooth. You cauterize the problem. You end the pain forever. And to be fair, sometimes it does dull the agony, temporarily, by killing the nerve. Of course, it also damages the tooth further, invites infection, and risks setting your tongue on fire. But hey, pros and cons. The worm theory has a long, bizarre history. It stretches back to ancient Babylon, where a poem describes a toothworm that drinks blood and nibbles at bones. The idea spread through Europe and the Islamic world, showing up in medical texts, priestly scrolls, and peasant superstition alike. Historians still argue whether medieval physicians truly believed in the literal worm, or whether they used it as metaphor. But one thing's certain, lots of people tried to kill it. Other methods: smoking henbane beneath the tongue, applying crushed leeches to the cheek, or this classic: mix soot and honey, pack it into the cavity, and seal it with wax. then heat the whole thing with a taper. You don't get better, you just distract yourself by worrying whether your jaw will catch fire. Back in your hut, you recover slowly. The burnt taste in your mouth lingers for days. You can't chew, your gums are raw. Your tongue feels like it's being rubbed with sand. You start dreaming about soft foods, stewed apples, soaked bread, maybe a roasted squash. But the village cook only offers salted pork and barley. Chewing it feels like being punched in the face by a ghost. And still, you're not the only one suffering. Your neighbor's daughter has started clutching her cheek. Her face is puffed. Her eyes are watery. She's 8 years old. Her mother's talking about binding a toad to her jaw at the next full moon. Yes, really, toads were believed to absorb illness. If you tied one alive or dead to the outside of an infected area, the affliction would transfer. It's not clear how anyone came up with this. Maybe desperation, maybe just medieval logic, and if the toad croaked or died, people took it as proof that it worked. You offer your neighbor some of the vinegar rinse. She declines, says she'll try the toad first. Meanwhile, someone in the next village over claims he cured his toothache by driving a nail into a tree while chanting his name backwards. He's now known as Backward Ned. You'll take your chances with hot iron. This is the dental world you live in. There are no x-rays, no fillings, no braces, no clean white tiles or mint-flavored gels. Just folk magic, fire, and men with questionable toolkits. And while you rest, mouth slightly open, eyes unfocused, you start to understand something important. You're not fighting the pain, you're negotiating with it. The days crawl forward, and your jaw, while still tender, has mercifully stopped trying to leap off your face. You can talk again, sort of. You can chew if the food is soft enough, and you've gotten good at the sad little closed-mouth smile people give when they're trying to look friendly without showing teeth. It's the medieval equivalent of smiling with your eyes and hoping no one notices the gaping socket in your mouth. Just when you think you're through the worst of it, someone stops you in the street. "You still got pain in there?" he asks. He's a peddler, face tanned like boot leather, teeth a riot of brown and grey. You admit, cautiously, that there's still a bit of soreness. He grins wide. "I've got just the thing, imported. Very special." Uh-oh. From the folds of his cloak, he pulls out a bundle of herbs and powders wrapped in oiled parchment. You squint at the label. It says arsenicum, feniculum, bone dust. And yes, that first word is exactly what it sounds like. Welcome to the medieval world of dental remedies, where the line between medicine and poison is mostly imaginary. People will put almost anything into their mouths if someone promises it will stop the pain. You've already seen vinegar, frog guts, and smoking toadstools. But now we're entering the elite tier. Crushed bones, powdered metals, and actual, honest-to-goodness arsenic. Highly toxic, often fatal. But hey, maybe it'll kill the pain before it kills you. And it's not just arsenic. People are also applying mercury paste directly to their gums. Mercury, liquid metal that's great for gold processing and absolutely terrible for your nervous system. Some healers use it to treat ulcers, blisters, or mysterious mouth lumps. Historians still argue whether they knew how dangerous it was, or whether they just thought the side effects were part of the healing. Either way, if you've got a molar that's throbbing like a drum, you might be convinced to smear on a little silver poison and call it a balm. You decline the peddler's generous offer. He shrugs and moves on to sell to a shepherd with a black eye and half a front tooth. But that doesn't mean you're out of options. Your cousin appears again, always helpful, always with a new idea. This time, it's powdered staghorn mixed with warm ale. Supposedly, the ash of antlers has powerful curative properties. You mix it into your drink, swish it, and then because it's also believed to toughen the heart, you swallow it. It tastes like mud and despair, but you try it anyway. It doesn't help. You move on to another recipe. Dried crushed snail shells, mixed with vinegar and salt, rub directly onto the gum. It stings. Your tongue goes numb for 5 minutes. Then the pain returns. Congratulations, you're now participating in centuries of trial and error chemistry on yourself. Some of these concoctions do have mild antiseptic properties. Salt can help reduce swelling. Vinegar might kill off surface bacteria, but in the wrong concentrations, or mixed with whatever random powder the seller has lying around. They're just as likely to burn holes in your cheeks as fix anything. Meanwhile, people are starting to whisper about a monk in the hills who's developed a cure-all salve made from powdered boar tusk and elderflower. He claims it stops pain in minutes. Others say it turns your mouth green and makes your breath smell like wet moss. To make things even more surreal, there's a wandering physic in the next town who's convinced that blowing dried nettle powder into the ear closest to the aching tooth will reroute the pain through your sinuses and out of your nose. You laugh, you cough, you actually consider it. Because here's the thing, medieval people aren't stupid. They're working with what they've got. And what they've got is limited knowledge, scattered herbal lore, and desperation. There's no real distinction yet between pharmacist and alchemist, between doctor and street magician. Everyone is experimenting, guessing, hoping. Sometimes they get it right. More often, they don't. You lie awake one night, staring at the ceiling, your tongue pressed against a sore gum. You wonder how many others are doing the same. Farmers, bakers, midwives, stable hands, each of them with pain flaring behind the teeth, and nothing but soot and prayer to fight it. One poor soul in the village tried bone boiling, literally heating a tooth over fire until it popped. Another swore by applying crushed apple seeds, which, fun fact, contain trace amounts of cyanide. A third used boiled horsehair as a floss alternative. That went about as well as you'd expect. And yet, they all keep trying. You keep trying. Because pain has a way of demanding attention, and if the choice is between burning your mouth with powdered lead or living with the agony, well, people pick the powder more often than you'd think. Tomorrow, you'll try a sage leaf poultice. You'll chew it slowly, press it into the sore, and tell yourself it feels better. It might be a placebo, or it might be the one thing that doesn't make it worse. Either way, it's worth a shot. Another day, another wave of mouth misery. You're starting to think your teeth have formed a mutinous guild and are staging a slow, deliberate rebellion, one abscess at a time. The poultice didn't help. The sage tasted fine, but your gums still throb with an ancient, aching rhythm that seems perfectly timed to the distant toll of the church bell. Bong, bong, ow. So, you go back to the healer, not the peddler, not the smoker, but a woman known only as Mother Elga. She lives just outside the village near the woods, with more animals than furniture, and a garden that smells like wet moss, burning thyme, and something sharp, maybe pickled turnip. She agrees to look at your mouth. Her hut is filled with jars, roots, crushed minerals, feathers, things you don't recognize. You sit down on a stool made of 3 uneven stones, while she peers into your mouth with the end of a goose feather. She says, pulling back with a wince. You've been letting bad spirits settle in the jaw, and your breath smells like spoiled blessings. Charming. But she's not wrong. Your breath is awful. And not just morning breath. Awful, medieval awful, the kind that could curdle fresh milk and make infants cry. You've noticed people inching away when you speak. Even your dog won't lick your face anymore. Halitosis, bad breath, isn't just a personal embarrassment in the Middle Ages. It's seen as a sign of rot, sin, or worse, demonic possession. Breath was considered a reflection of the soul. Sweet-smelling breath, a clean heart. Foul breath, well, you might be on the devil's mailing list. To fix this, people go to all kinds of lengths. Mother Elga brings out her most sacred breath treatment, a mixture of boiled parsley, mint, honey, and something she refers to only as blessed charcoal. She says it's made from burnt scripture pages, but she winks, so maybe it's just twigs. She instructs you to chew, swallow, then hold your breath, while she murmurs a short prayer to Saint Veronica. You comply. It tastes like burnt salad and tree sap. This is only one of many strange breath treatments floating around the medieval world. Others include chewing cloves wrapped in linen and pinned to your tunic like a portable breath badge, swishing wine infused with rosemary, sage, and ashes of rabbit fur, holding your mouth open in front of a smoking brazier full of camphor and pine. None of these options smell good. They just smell stronger than the original problem. And let's be honest, with your teeth decaying like sun-dried pears and half your meals getting stuck between molars that barely touch anymore. It's no wonder your breath could take the varnish off a cathedral pew. Some monks recommend spiritual solutions. Confess your sins, cleanse your soul, and your breath will follow. Others suggest dietary changes. Avoid onions, garlic, spoiled meat, or anything melancholic in nature. Of course, when your daily meals consist mostly of onion-stewed lentils and dried fish, good luck with that. In some places, breath fresheners become status symbols. Nobles chew sugar-coated anise seeds and rinse with imported rosewater, luxuries you'll never taste. The rest of the population, they settle for chewing bark, picking at their teeth with goose quills, and hoping for the best. And yes, there are early versions of chewing gum. One recipe calls for boiling pine resin until it becomes tacky, then mixing it with mint and honey and rolling it into little balls. You're supposed to chew them after meals to scrub the rot. In reality, they stick to your teeth, like tar, and pull out fillings if you had any, which you don't. You're lucky if you can afford a sprig of fresh herbs to chew after a meal. You're not brushing, you're not flossing, and your mouth is a small medieval ecosystem, complete with bacteria, fungal spores, the occasional bit of hay, and half a pickled beetroot from last week. People in your village begin to accept that your breath has reached a certain legendary status. A child tells you your mouth smells like bad cheese and rain. A man at the tavern offers you a copper coin not to speak. The local priest asks if you've been fasting for too long and suggests you air out your soul. You try not to take it personally, but it stings. Because while losing teeth is one thing, everyone loses teeth eventually. Breath is social. Breath is how you greet people, how you pray aloud, how you barter and sing and laugh. And when yours smells like something crawled inside and died a poetic death, it's hard to feel fully human. So you take Mother Elga's advice. You chew herbs daily. You avoid meat that's turned sour. You swish with salt water, rinse with vinegar, dab your tongue with mint oil, and slowly, the air around your mouth begins to smell less offensive. Still not pleasant, but less like a cursed cellar. And honestly, that's a win. It's a market day, and your mouth is, for once, not trying to murder you. The gums are healing. Your breath, while still not fragrant, no longer makes people cross themselves mid-sentence. You've started eating more confidently. Soft cheeses, stewed leeks, soggy bread soaked in broth. Your smile, such as it is, still looks like a row of crooked fence posts. But at least it doesn't hurt. Then you overhear something near the spice store. A merchant from the coast is telling a wide-eyed crowd about a nobleman who had all his rotten teeth pulled out and replaced with gold. Gold! Your ears perk up. You follow the merchant, and he repeats the story. A wealthy duke, too ashamed of his ruined smile, paid a craftsman to carve replacement teeth out of hammered gold and fasten them to his jaw. The whole thing gleamed when he smiled. He blinded 3 squires just by laughing. The merchant jokes. You can't tell if he's serious. But the idea lingers, because in this era where most people just let their teeth fall out like sad little gravestones, the rich have options. Fancy, gleaming, impractical options. Tooth replacements aren't common, but they do exist in the Middle Ages. Some were purely decorative. False teeth made of ivory, bone, or precious metals, fitted into the mouth more for looks than function. Others attempted to replicate chewing function, with varying, mostly terrible results. If you were wealthy and vain, you could commission a set of gold-capped teeth to fill in the gaps, though attaching them was a problem. Some were tied to the existing teeth with thread or gold wire. Others were literally glued to the gums using pitch or tree sap. They didn't stay in place for long, and eating with them. Imagine trying to chew boiled cabbage while wearing a crown on your tongue. But hey, it looked impressive. A mouth full of gold was a symbol of power, wealth, and mystique. It told everyone you had the resources to fix what nature destroyed, or at least cover it up with something shiny. Of course, for people like you, the gold route isn't an option. But even among common folk, there are substitutes. In some parts of Europe, people use animal teeth, most often from dogs, sheep, or even pigs, carved and polished, then jammed into place where your molars used to be. If they're loose, They're tied down with linen thread or leather straps. Yes, it's every bit as horrific as it sounds. In a few documented cases, real human teeth were used as transplants, usually stolen from corpses. It sounds like urban legend, but historians confirm it happened. Battlefield dead, paupers, and executed criminals often had their teeth harvested for wealthier mouths. You begin to wonder whose molars were glittering in that nobleman's grin. The moral question doesn't seem to bother anyone. The teeth are just commodities. If they're in a live mouth, they're valuable. If not, they're for sale. It's almost poetic, and also very gross. You spot the merchant again later, bragging that a prince in the East had his teeth filed into sharp points, then plated in silver to look more dragon than man. You laugh, but then you remember, some cultures did exactly that. In Southeast Asia and parts of Africa, dental modifications had cultural significance. Teeth were filed into shapes, dyed black, or adorned with jewels. In some cases it was a rite of passage, in others it was pure fashion. But in Europe, it was just the nobility being dramatic. And tooth fashion doesn't end there. One noblewoman, you hear, had her remaining front teeth carved into tiny floral patterns. Another blackened hers on purpose, to make her smile look more demure, less suggestive. Apparently, showing too many teeth was considered vulgar in some circles. So naturally, rich people did it more. Meanwhile, you can't afford salt unless you sell your boots. You head home that evening thinking about teeth differently. They're not just bones in your mouth, they're statements. Markers of class, indicators of health, fortune and status. A peasant with a full smile might be called lucky, or accused of witchcraft. A noble with no teeth, likely hiding behind a veil, or pretending it's all in fashion. You glance at your reflection in a puddle. There's a gap now, a dark little canyon between two crooked survivors. You don't hate it. It's real. It's your smile.
You grin anyway.
And your dog still loves you. You wake to a dull ache, but not the usual tooth-throbbing kind. This time it's in your joints, your muscles, and somewhere behind your eyes, like the flu has decided to stage a full-body dress rehearsal. You shuffle out of bed and glance in a polished scrap of bronze. Your gums are not looking great. Puffy, dark, bleeding when you yawn too wide. You chalk it up to another failed herbal rinse. But then you hear the word whispered around the village square, passed from mouth to mouth like a cursed tune. Scurvy. It's a sailor's disease, they say. But here it is, creeping inland, reaching into cottages like yours. You're not a sailor. You haven't even seen the sea. But you do know that everyone who gets scurvy starts losing teeth, one by one. Now, medieval folks don't know what vitamin C is. They haven't discovered ascorbic acid or studied citrus fruits under glass domes, but they do know what happens when it's missing. Gums turn black and spongy, teeth wobble in their sockets. People's mouths start to look like moldy loaves of bread, and eventually the teeth just fall out. They blame it on cold humors, on mists from the river, on bad meat or weak blood. But whatever the cause, the symptoms are unmistakable. Even you can spot them now. You've been living mostly on root vegetables and grain. Not a lot of greens, not much fruit. Definitely no lemons or oranges. Not unless you're rich, or living near a monastery that imports weird exotic foods no one knows how to pronounce. And the people who do know, monks, clerics, maybe a handful of scholars, are still arguing over whether scurvy is caused by bad air, spoiled food, or sin. Historians today still debate whether the average peasant would have even recognized scurvy as a distinct condition. In some places it was simply called the bleeding sickness. You call it a disaster in your mouth. The pain isn't sharp, it's more like your gums are slowly melting. You try to eat, and your molars press against soft tissue that bleeds like an open wound. Bread crusts become sandpaper. Even soft cheese feels like a betrayal. You start favoring one side of your mouth, then the other. Eventually, you just stop chewing. You visit a healer again. Mother Elga is busy burning rosemary, so you see a younger man from the abbey, who's recently taken up medical studies. He's read parts of Galen. He has strong opinions. He examines your gums and frowns. Your blood is corrupted, he says. You must be bled. You blink, From where? He gestures vaguely. Anywhere. Bleeding is the go-to cure for just about everything. Toothache, bleed, fever, bleed, gout, melancholy, heartbreak. Get a nice big bowl and open a vein. The idea is to restore balance to your humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Too much blood, you're sluggish and prone to rotting gums. Take some out. Simple logic. So you let him slice your arm with a sharpened quill and catch the blood in a cracked cup. He blesses you, tells you to fast and pray, gives you a rejuvenating tonic made from barley water and beetroot. It tastes like mud and regret. Back home, you try your best. You boil greens, chew on dried apples, and even barter for a half-rotten onion from the tavern's cellar. Anything with a hint of juice in it, anything that might bring the color back to your gums. But nothing works quickly. Scurvy is a slow burn. It unravels your mouth piece by piece, turning healthy tissue into soft rote. One tooth starts to wiggle. Then another. You dread sneezing. Every time you cough, you worry something might drop out and land in your soup. People begin to notice. They don't mention it directly, too rude, but you can feel it. The pause before they speak to you, the pity, or worse, the fear. Because some believe that when a person's teeth fall out, their soul is following close behind. A traveling friar tells a story about a man whose teeth all fell out at once during Mass. They clattered to the floor like dice. The priest stopped the sermon and declared him possessed. You're not quite there, but you do start keeping your lips together more often. You speak softly, you chew slower, you become one of those people who walks around with a kerchief pressed to their mouth. Not from manners, but from necessity. And in your quiet moments, lying on your straw mat, staring at the smoke-stained ceiling, you start to ask the question, what happens when they're all gone? Because it's not just the pain anymore. It's not just the shame. It's the realization that in your world, losing your teeth isn't a quirk of age or diet. It's a sign that your body is fading. Failing. It's a death spiral that starts behind your lips. So you chew mint. You pray to Apollonia. You boil cabbage until the entire house smells like a bad memory. You do everything because you're not ready to lose another piece of yourself. Not yet. The next time you lose a tooth, it doesn't come with pain. There's no swelling, no bleeding, just a quiet snap and a soft clink as it lands in your bowl of barley gruel like a tiny morbid garnish. You stare at it for a long time, unsure if you should bury it, throw it, or just pretend it didn't happen. Eventually, you wrap it in a square of cloth and tie it to your belt. That's what people are doing these days. It's supposed to ward off more loss, like the tooth is acting as a talisman, reminding the others to stay in line. You're not alone in this. Half the village has a missing tooth or two. Some proudly display their gaps as battle scars. Others hide them with scarves or quiet mumbling. But a few go a step further. They wear teeth, not their own, not necessarily anyone's they know, just teeth. Hung from strings, sewn into cloth, threaded into necklaces like beads. Some are human, some animal, and a few are so old and yellowed, you're not entirely sure they were ever attached to a living thing. Tooth amulets, they're called. Charms of protection, strength, or even fertility. You hear stories. A blacksmith wears the tooth of a wolf around his neck to keep his hands steady. A midwife keeps a pouch of baby teeth hidden in her apron to protect the children she delivers. A wandering merchant swears he found a molar from St. Bartholomew himself, guaranteed to stop any bleeding. He keeps it in a silver box. You, not being especially wealthy or blessed, settle for sewing your own lost tooth into the corner of your tunic. It feels silly at first, but also oddly comforting. Like maybe this small, pale piece of yourself still holds some power. Maybe if you keep it close, the rest of your teeth will take the hint. This isn't just superstition, either. Across the medieval world, teeth have deep symbolic meaning. They're seen as vessels of life force, tokens of youth, and relics of vitality. A child's first lost tooth might be buried under a hearthstone or tossed onto a rooftop as an offering. A warrior might carry the tooth of a slain enemy or friend as a charm against cowardice. Some even believe that wearing teeth protects against dental pain. The logic: if you carry the tooth externally, The affliction has already left your body. You're tricking fate, outsourcing your suffering to a charm. Historians still debate whether this practice was tied more to magic or medicine. But whatever its roots, it was widespread. In many regions, tooth charms were common wedding gifts, especially for brides considered delicate or sickly, because nothing says lifelong health and happiness like a necklace made of molars. There's even a trend among certain religious pilgrims. They collect fallen teeth during their travels, believing them to be fragments of holy intervention. Some claim the teeth fell out after receiving a blessing, and thus are sacred. Others just collect them, like seashell. You do not shake their hands. You begin to notice more tooth-based tokens around your village. A mother pins her son's milk tooth to her sleeve after he survives a fever. A tanner wears a dog's fang on a leather cord to scare off the spirits of rot. Even the village priest quietly keeps a glass jar with 3 tiny teeth on the altar. He doesn't talk about them. No one asks. And while some of it feels like wishful thinking, you can't deny that having your tooth tied to your belt gives you a tiny sense of control. It's like telling your body, I see what you're doing, and I'm watching you. One night, you dream of your teeth talking. They argue. They mutter about poor working conditions and unreasonable expectations. One molar stages a strike. Another demands a raise in calcium. You wake up sweating, clutching your jaw, and whisper a quick apology. The next day, you drink milk. Just in case. You begin to develop a ritual. Every time you eat, you tap your tunic where the tooth is sewn. Every time your gums ache, you touch the charm. It's not scientific. It's not even logical. But in a world where every cure is part guesswork and part prayer, it feels necessary. And maybe, just maybe, that's what keeps the rest of them in place. For now. You're mending a boot one day, when a traveling friar stops by your cottage, asking for bread and water. You oblige, mostly because he looks like he's eaten nothing but air and bad luck for 3 days. And while he chews his crust with alarming effort, you can't help but notice something strange. His toothbrush. At least you think it's a toothbrush. It's a stick, about the length of your hand, with one end frayed like it's been gnawed by a rodent. He chews it rhythmically, between bites, turning it in his mouth with the precision of someone following a sacred ritual. You ask him what it is. He answers, between chews, miswak. He's been to the East. Learned the practice from scholars in far-off cities where people actually think about their mouths. There he says they use special chewing sticks from particular trees. Salvadora persica, if you want to be fancy, because the wood has natural antibacterial properties. You blink. So you just chew it, spit, repeat. The idea isn't as foreign as it sounds. In fact, chewing sticks are probably humanity's oldest dental tool. Across Africa, the Middle East and Asia, people have been using twigs from medicinal trees for centuries, fraying the ends into bristle-like tips and using them to scrub their teeth and gums. Even in medieval Europe, variations exist. They're just much less effective. Your version is a stick from the nearest bush, charred at the end and maybe dipped in salt or soot. You've used it before once or twice, when your cousin insisted it would polish your gums. It mostly made you gag, but now you're intrigued. You ask the friar if it works. He gives you a smile, gappy but oddly fresh, and says, "My teeth haven't rotted out yet." That's good enough for you. So you find a branch, soften the end over a flame, and start chewing. It tastes like bark, which it is. You scrape it along your teeth. It feels weird. It makes your gums sting. But when you rinse with water afterward, the stuff that comes out is unsettling. Bits of food, sour-tasting slime, tiny flecks of blood. Apparently, you've been harboring a full dinner menu between your molars. Soon, chewing sticks become part of your daily rhythm. You cut fresh ones every few days, chew and spit like a religious rite. It's not a miracle. Your breath still leans toward barnyard, but your teeth feel cleaner, smoother, less like they're wearing furry little coats. And you're not alone. Others in the village start trying it. One woman uses fennel stalks. Another tries nettles, which ends poorly. A boy uses a twig soaked in vinegar, accidentally burns his gums, and claims he's now immune to pain. He's not. Someone even tries making a primitive brush by tying hog bristles to a stick with twine. It falls apart after 2 uses, but it's progress. Because here's the thing, medieval people want clean teeth. There's evidence of toothpicks, mouthwashes and yes, early brushes scattered across centuries and continents. But without a unified dental philosophy or much understanding of enamel, decay or hygiene, it's a scattered effort. Still, they persist. Toothpicks, for instance, are surprisingly popular. Wealthier folks carry metal ones tucked into their belts, often made from bronze or silver. Commoners whittle them from bone or wood. After meals, everyone pokes around their molars with great enthusiasm, often sharing the same pick among friends. Sanitary? No. Social? Absolutely. In taverns, it's not uncommon to see someone leaning over a table, pinky raised, digging a splinter of rabbit with a twig. Sometimes they hold competitions to see who can extract the longest piece. The loser buys drinks. Back at home, your stick routine becomes second nature. Your gums are less inflamed, you're even getting used to the taste of bark. You start to think maybe, just maybe, you've stumbled onto something before it's time. Then your neighbor shows up. She's made a paste. Made of what? You really shouldn't have asked. Charcoal, salt, powdered bone, and a dash of honey for binding. She applies it to her teeth with a rag, scrubbing furiously while muttering a prayer to Saint Basil. She claims it makes the teeth shine like moons. You glance at her mouth. Her teeth are now grey and flecked with soot. Moons, if they were made of coal. But she seems happy. Her breath is marginally better. You nod encouragingly. And even if none of these tools really work by modern standards, the fact that people are trying, that's something. You finish the day with a rinse of salt water and mint. You sit outside, chewing the end of your frayed stick, watching the sunset. Your teeth still hurt. Your gums still ache. But for the first time, you feel like you're doing something about it. And that counts. It's late afternoon, and you're sitting outside your cottage, gently working a twig along your molars, when your uncle waddles up with a proud grin. At least, you think he's grinning. It's hard to tell, because half his mouth is missing, and the other half is showcasing a single victorious tooth, like a banner in a ruined castle. "I've made toothpaste," he announces. You lower your chewing stick slowly. He reaches into his satchel and pulls out a small clay pot with a crusty lid. When he opens it, a powerful aroma erupts, part soot, part moldy herbs, part garlic. You're afraid to ask, but he's already dipping his finger in, smearing the dark paste across his teeth, and grinning like a man who's just invented fire. To be fair, the concept of toothpaste or tooth powder, as it's often called in this era, isn't new. The Romans used them. The Egyptians used them. And by the Middle Ages, there's a long list of gritty, grainy, often foul-tasting substances meant to clean the teeth or at least rub the top layer of filth off them. Your uncle's version is a homemade blend of ash, ground-up oyster shell, salt, and stale ale. Some recipes include sage, mint, or even crushed, dried rose petals, if you're feeling fancy. The wealthy might dab a paste on with a cloth. The poor just scoop it up and go to town. You try it, because you're brave, and because he's watching. The texture is like wet sand mixed with regret. It squeaks between your teeth. The salt stings. The ashes leave a bitter tang that clings to the roof of your mouth like punishment. But afterward, your teeth feel cleaner, rougher, scraped raw, sure, but a little less like a moss-covered fence post. You rinse with water. Your gums bleed slightly. Your uncle claps you on the back and declares you reborn. Toothpaste, in its many forms, becomes a small obsession. You hear of other villagers concocting their own blends. Crushed sage and sea salt, which smells pleasant but tastes like herby seawater. Burnt bread crusts, mixed with vinegar, which makes your mouth feel like it's been scoured with vinegar-soaked sandpaper. Charcoal and honey for those who like their dental care with a side of cavity-inducing sweetness. Of course, none of these pastes actually stop tooth decay. But they do something, and that's enough. The act of scrubbing feels productive, intentional, like washing your hands after mucking a pig pen, even if the soap is just lard and pebbles. Some people try more experimental methods. One bold soul applies mustard seed paste directly to her aching molars. It burns. She screams, then claims it worked. Historians still argue whether she was numbed by pain or just never spoke clearly again. Another man in the village takes to swishing crushed coral mixed with goat's milk. It stains his teeth pink. He becomes known somewhat affectionately as Coral Mouth. Tooth powders start to evolve from just functional to fashionable. In certain noble circles, adding crushed pearls or silver leaf becomes the trend. The glittering flecks don't clean anything, but they look impressive when you smile. Which, let's be honest, is most of what high society's about. A monk from the nearby priory claims to have developed a divinely inspired formula using dried lily petals and ash from sacred fires. He says it prevents cavities and keeps demons from nesting in the molars. People believe him. And then there's the apothecary from 2 towns over, who sells pre-mixed tooth tinctures in tiny bottles. Each labeled with bold, expensive promises, brightens the bite, whitens the wisdoms, refreshes the holy breath. You buy one, it tastes like vinegar, soap and mint. Your breath improves for a few hours. Then it returns to its usual bouquet of regret and breakfast stew. Still, it's all part of a growing trend. People are trying to care for their teeth, not just react to pain, but prevent it. And while there's no understanding of plaque, acids or bacteria, there is a growing sense that what you put in your mouth, both in terms of food and paste, has an effect. Of course, the irony is that many of these gritty powders are slowly eroding enamel. Scrubbing with ash and salt might leave your teeth gleaming, but it also makes them sensitive, brittle, and more prone to cracking. No one knows this. They just smile wider, proud of their pale, chisel-marked grins. You find yourself in front of the polished bronze mirror again one morning. You smile. There's still that gap, and some teeth look like they've been lightly gnawed by mice, but they're cleaner. Your gums aren't as swollen, and for the first time, your breath no longer smells like something expired inside your esophagus. You nod to yourself. Progress. Another week, another new remedy. You've barely recovered from the salt and ash toothpaste when your cousin, yes, her again, rushes in clutching a parchment scroll like it's a map to buried treasure. She's breathless, eyes wide, and she has news. The bishop's clerk says honey cures everything. You blink. Like everything. She nods vigorously. Even mouth rot. Especially mouth rot. You don't know whether to be excited or terrified. But she's right about one thing. Honey, in medieval medicine, is a big deal. Not just because it's sweet, though that helps, but because people genuinely believe it has healing powers, and they're not entirely wrong. Honey's natural antibacterial properties were known even in ancient times. It's sticky, suffocates microbes, and has a low enough water content that bacteria struggle to survive in it. In the Middle Ages, it's applied to wounds, mixed into potions, spread on sore gums, and even slathered onto burns. Got a rash? Honey. Got a headache? Honey and vinegar. Toothache? Honey with a side of everything else you can get your hands on. So now you're being gently instructed to rub warm honey on your gums every morning and night. It's supposed to soften the humors and draw out the evil. In reality, it just makes your mouth taste like breakfast and stick to the inside of your cheeks like glue. But it doesn't hurt. For once, so you keep doing it. Eventually, your cousin ups the ante. She brings a new scroll from the monastery library, well, a scrap of one, describing the full treatment: honey mixed with crushed sage, a pinch of salt, and oddly powdered deer antler. It's for strengthening, she explains solemnly. A deer never loses his teeth. You want to point out that deer definitely do lose teeth, but you don't have the energy. Still, you try it. It tastes like someone salted a herbal lollipop and dropped it in a fireplace. You gag, but you don't spit it out, because strangely, it feels good. Not modern dental care good, but mild relief after days of nerve pain good. And that's enough. The mix catches on. Soon, everyone's trying some version of the honey cure. Some leave out the salt, others replace the sage with lavender. One man uses honey and onions, then insists he can feel the rot retreating. No one wants to sit next to him. But the idea of sweetness and healing becomes a kind of medieval oral care gospel. That's when things take a turn. Because what happens when something feels good and tastes good? People start using more of it, too much of it. And this is where the problem begins. Imported sugar, still a luxury item, is slowly trickling into markets. It's expensive, yes, but merchants, monks, and nobility are starting to indulge. They've learned how to bake, preserve, and candy things. Honey's local and accessible, sugar is exotic and addictive. Both find their way into desserts, tonics, and yes, dental remedies. You hear whispers of sweet ash paste being sold in town. It's got charcoal for scrubbing, honey for soothing, and a lot of sugar. People love it. It's like brushing your teeth with dessert. Children steal spoonfuls, adults hoard it, and almost immediately teeth start rotting faster. Historians now believe the introduction of sugar in medieval diets is one of the key reasons tooth decay becomes even more widespread. Before sugar, decay existed, but it was slow. Bread and grain wore down enamel, yes, but they didn't feed bacteria the way sugar did. Once sugar arrives in the diet, especially in forms that stick to your teeth, it's game over. You notice it first in the baker's wife. Her smile, once wide and only missing a couple teeth, has started to darken. Her molars are caving inward, like soggy stones. She tells you she's been using the sweet powder every night. Makes my breath smell like apples, she said. It does. It also makes her mouth look like a crumbling wall. You start to understand something. In the medieval world, sweetness is both comfort and curse. It soothes you, masks the pain, gives you a little moment of relief, but it also feeds the very decay you're trying to fight. A sticky trap disguised as mercy. Still, you keep using the honey, carefully, sparingly. You avoid the sugar powder. You warn your cousin. She doesn't listen. A month later, one of her front teeth falls out while she's laughing. She stops laughing for a while. And you? You keep brushing with your stick. You rinse with salt water. You swab on just enough honey to ease the sting, but not enough to tempt the worm. You've learned to walk the fine line between healing and harm. Because in this world, nothing's ever just good. Even sweetness has teeth. It starts with a whisper at the tavern. Low, conspiratorial. The kind of murmuring that makes people lean in and pretend they're not listening. A man from a nearby town had a toothache, they say. Bad one. Swollen face. Pos pocket. Couldn't eat. Couldn't sleep. And then, he prayed it away. Not just any prayer, mind you. A very specific one. To a very specific saint. Saint Apollonia. You've heard the name before, tucked into muttered blessings, scratched onto candles, sewn into the hems of herbalist aprons. But you never paid much attention, until now. According to the story, Apollonia was a Christian martyr from Alexandria. The Romans tried to force her to renounce her faith, and when she refused, they pulled out all her teeth with iron tongs. Every last one. Then they threw her into fire. Which is pretty grim. But afterward, people began praying to her whenever their own mouths started to betray them. Toothache, pray to Apollonia. Swollen gum, light a candle. Jaw locked like a rusted hinge. Kneel and whisper her name. She became the unofficial patron saint of anyone whose molars were misbehaving. The church never officially declared her the saint of dentistry, but popular belief did. Across Europe, peasants and nobles alike whispered her name whenever the pain flared up. Monks copied her story into prayer books. Merchants carried tiny carved images of her, always with a pair of pliers in hand and a serene expression that says, "Yes, I have been through worse, thank you." Your village doesn't have a proper church statue, but someone's painted her on a piece of driftwood, a slender figure in a red robe, holding a single tooth like a prized possession. You find yourself staring at it longer than you should. You're not especially religious, but when your toothache comes back, suddenly, savagely, you light a candle anyway. And then you pray. Not loudly, not theatrically, just a quiet mutter. Saint Apollonia, keep the rot away. It doesn't work immediately, but the pain eases later that night, and you can't help but wonder. You're not the only one. Others start flocking to her image. People leave offerings, feathers, bits of cloth, small coins, even teeth wrapped in ribbon. You see a baker's wife kneel for hours. A shepherd whispers prayers while holding his dog's molar. He insists it was gifted to him in a dream. Soon, a ritual begins to form. Before an extraction, some people hold a candle to their cheek and say a prayer to Apollonia, asking for a steady hand and merciful pain. Afterwards, they bury the tooth near a shrine, or, lacking a shrine, under a tree. Some carry amulets with her image carved into bone or etched into pewter. The more superstitious claim she can stop a tooth from going bad if you catch the rot early and pray fast enough. One old woman tells you that Apollonia lives inside the flame of every oil lamp and that her spirit can smell decay. She recommends sleeping with a lit candle beside your bed so the saint can smoke out the bad humors. You try it once, you wake up with singed eyebrows, but you do keep the amulet, and every time your gums twinge, you reach for it. This blending of faith and medicine is everywhere in the medieval world. Every ailment has its saint. Saint Roch for plague, Saint Dymphna for madness, Saint Blaise for sore throats, for toothaches. It's Apollonia, whether officially canonized or not. Her cult spreads by word of mouth, by whispered stories, by desperate people clinging to the smallest chance of relief. Some towns even hold feast days for her. In certain regions, people gather on February 9th to honor her. They parade through the streets holding candles, and in some cases teeth, real or carved, worn like medals. There's singing, prayer. In one bizarre instance, a group reportedly reenacted her martyrdom using turnips and a pair of pliers made of bread. Historians still argue whether these traditions were started by church officials or grew organically from folk belief. Either way, the devotion is real. And honestly, you get it. When you're lying on your straw mat, breath shallow, tongue swollen, tooth pulsing like a drumbeat inside your skull, you'd pray to anyone. And maybe, just maybe, Apollonia listens. Because some nights the pain retreats. And you whisper, thank you. Even if no one's listening, the pain returns during harvest. You're halfway through binding a bundle of barley when it hits a bolt behind your molar, sudden and sharp, like someone jabbed a glowing poker into your jaw. You freeze, mouth half open, and drop the stalks into the dirt. You already know, you don't even have to touch your face. This isn't a regular toothache. This one feels wrong. The fever sets in by nightfall. You wake drenched in sweat, the inside of your mouth throbbing like a second heartbeat. Your tongue feels too big. Your cheek is hot, stretched tight. You reach up with trembling fingers and press against your jaw. It crackles, and that's when you know it's not just rot anymore. It's infection. You've heard stories. Everyone has. People whose mouths turned black, who started spitting pus, who developed boils in their gums. But this isn't just a boil. This is something deeper, more violent. This is plague mouth. The term's not official, but everyone knows what it means. The Black Death doesn't just strike the lungs or the lymph nodes. Sometimes it starts in the mouth. Bows form under the jaw, gums turn grey, teeth fall out in chunks. The smell alone is enough to make people scatter like rats. And now, your gums are blistering. You stagger to the village healer. Not Mother Elga, she's already taken to her sickbed, but a younger woman named Hilda, who's barely old enough to know which herbs are safe. Her hands shake when she sees your face. She doesn't speak, just ushers you in and starts lighting incense. The treatment? Not much. A poultice of crushed garlic and warm wine, clove oil, if you're lucky, though it's expensive, a rinse of vinegar, mint, and ashes, and prayer, always prayer. There's a Saint Sebastian token hung above her door, plague protection, supposedly. You add a whispered nod to Apollonia, just in case. Hilda gently presses on the swelling. You nearly black out. She murmurs something about draining the pocket. You don't ask what that means. She brings out a knife. This is where things get very real. Medieval dentistry, if it can even be called that, has no tools for abscesses. But surgery does. And in this world, surgery means cutting things open and hoping for the best. You bite down on a rag soaked in ale. She slices. The pain is indescribable. It burns. It sears. You hear yourself screaming, but it sounds far away, like someone else's voice in a dream. Then comes the smell, foul, metallic, rotting. The abscess has ruptured. Yellow pus spills out, hot and thick. You collapse, not from pain this time, but relief. The pressure is gone. Hilda packs the wound with linen soaked in wine and binds your jaw in a sling. If it returns, she says, we'll have to cauterize it. You nod weakly. You can't speak. You spend the next few days drifting in and out of sleep. The fever lingers, but never breaks completely. Your mouth tastes like iron and old garlic. You can't eat. You can barely sip broth. Your body is in survival mode, and your mouth has become enemy territory. And still, you're lucky. Because in this era, an infected tooth can lead to sepsis, necrosis, death. There are no antibiotics, no painkillers, no sterile rooms, just wine, fire, and hope. Some say the plague finds you through your teeth, that it starts in the mouth, the rot, the pain, the weakness, and then spreads. Others believe bad teeth are signs of the plague, that if your gums turn black, it's already too late. Historians still debate whether dental symptoms were seen as cause or effect, but in either case, no one wants to be near a person with a swollen jaw and foul breath. You feel it, too. People avoid you. Your neighbor leaves food on the doorstep and scurries away without a word. Children stop playing outside your window. Even the dog keeps a cautious distance. You're not just sick now, you're feared. You think of Apollonia again. Of all the teeth ripped out, the fire, the calm smile in her portraits. You whisper to her in the dark. The swelling goes down. The fever eases. You survive.
But your mouth?
It's wrecked. You've lost 2 more teeth. Your gums are scarred. Your breath is thick, bitter, edged with something no amount of mint or prayer can fix. When you speak, your tongue has to navigate new terrain, hollows and ridges where teeth used to be. Still, you're breathing. Still, you're here. And in this time, in this place, that's more than most can say. By now, your smile, what's left of it, resembles the aftermath of a poorly planned siege. Gaps where teeth once stood like loyal sentries, jagged stubs of molars worn down to shadows, and gums that swell and retreat like tides with every passing season. But you're not alone. Plenty of mouths in your village look just as ravaged. So when the blacksmith's apprentice comes hobbling into the tavern one evening, with a brand new set of teeth, everyone stares. They're white, square, and suspiciously even. Too even. Someone asks, half laughing, half in awe, what he's got in there. He spits a grapeseed into his hand, grins and says, sheep bone. The room falls silent. You're staring too. Because sure, false teeth are a known thing in some parts of the world. But not here, not among you. You've seen people stuff cloth into their cheeks to fake a full face, or try to plug missing teeth with bits of wax or wood before a festival. But this is new. Turns out, the apprentice has a brother in a larger town, where there's a barber who's been tinkering with something revolutionary, carving animal bone into tooth shapes and fastening them into people's mouths using metal wire and soft beeswax. Primitive? Yes. Risky? Absolutely. But it looks good. From a distance. In the right light. And so begins your community's awkward, earnest foray into the world of early dentures. Let's be clear, medieval false teeth aren't foolproof. They're barely functional. They're clunky, uncomfortable, and prone to falling out mid-chew or mid-laugh. But they serve one purpose: appearance. Because as it turns out, missing teeth aren't just a health issue, they're a social liability. A gappy mouth can mark you as old, poor, or diseased. People start to talk, gossip travels faster than the plague, and it doesn't help that you've recently survived what looks suspiciously like plague mouth. So you start considering your options. You speak to the apprentice, who agrees to help. He carves a crude molar out of smooth bone and shapes it to fill one of your larger gaps. It's a bit long and has a flat, unnatural edge, but it fits, sort of. He softens beeswax over the hearth and presses it in to hold the piece. Then he ties a bit of thin twine around your 2 strongest teeth to anchor the makeshift bridge. It hurts. It feels like your mouth is stuffed with kindling. But when you look in the mirror, for the first time in weeks, you don't flinch. You test it out. Eat slowly, speak carefully, smile shyly. It works. Barely. The idea spreads. Soon, other villagers are trying their own versions. Bits of ivory, shaped wood, even teeth pulled from the recently deceased. Grave robbing isn't exactly smiled upon, but the dead don't complain, and teeth are teeth. Historians now know this happened more often than anyone wants to imagine. Early denturists sometimes bought teeth from the poor prisoners or battlefield corpses. The rich wore them proudly, which leads to a dark little truth. The best false teeth often come from the worst places. You hear rumors about noblemen in far-off cities with full, gleaming sets of human teeth, real ones collected from soldiers after a siege. There's even talk of an Italian merchant who offered to buy your smile if you were young and healthy. He'd extract your teeth, pay you in coin, and ship them off to be implanted in someone else's gums. Some villagers are horrified. Others consider it. You wonder, if the pain was gone, if the price was high enough, would you have sold your smile? You don't answer. Instead, you adjust your bone molar and light a candle. You've joined a strange club now, people with teeth not their own. You catch the glance of the baker's wife, who's clearly chewing with a new set of whittled pegs. You nod at her. She nods back. It's an unspoken agreement. Our mouths are borrowed, our smiles stitched together from imagination and desperation. And that's fine. Because in this world, survival comes in pieces. And if one of those pieces happens to be carved from a sheep's leg or someone else's incisor, well, at least you can still chew. Your new bone tooth is holding up surprisingly well, though you still avoid hard crusts and anything that crunches with an attitude. But now that your mouth is semi-functional again, you find yourself wondering how this became normal. Who decided that a butcher with a cleaver or a monk with a prayer book should double as a dental savior? You don't have to look far for the answer. Because now, the town barber, once content with trimming beards and slicing open veins for balance, has rolled out a new offering, full mouth services, and he's got a toolkit to match. You arrive at his stall one morning after hearing rumors of his new tooth gear. The setup is slightly terrifying. He's laid out his instruments on a clean cloth for all to see, each one gleaming in the sunlight like trophies from some gruesome sport. There's the tooth key, a long curved device meant to hook around a molar and twist it out like a cork. It's meant for speed, not precision. One hard crank and out comes the tooth, hopefully in one piece. There's a pair of iron forceps, scissor-like and more rust than metal, with curved ends designed to grab and yank. If they slip, they can crush a tooth instead of pulling it, turning the procedure into an excavation. Then there's the pelican, a brutal-looking contraption with a beak-shaped clamp designed to press against the tooth and the jawbone simultaneously. One twist too many, and your cheekbone might join the extraction party. The barber proudly explains each one, puffing out his chest. Used this one on a night last week. Got the tooth out, clean in 2 tries. You try not to ask what happened to the first attempt. Medieval dental tools aren't known for their delicacy. They're made for endurance, not ergonomics. There are no cushioned grips, no sterilized handles, and certainly no understanding of leverage as a dental science. Most of these tools are forged by blacksmiths, not medical professionals, and many are multi-purpose. One might be used for teeth on Monday and hoof paring on Tuesday. You watch as the barber sharpens a small chisel-like implement. Jaw splitter, he calls it. You decline his offer for a free trial. Yet despite the horror show appearance of these tools, they're in high demand. People line up with swollen jaws, blackened gums, and desperate eyes. Some bring coins, others barter. One woman offers 3 chickens for a molar extraction and a bit of clove oil. The barber agrees. He's not a dentist, but he has pulled more teeth than anyone else in town, and that makes him an expert. By default, the line between barber and surgeon in the Middle Ages is practically non-existent. They cut hair, they bleed patients, they lance boils, set bones, and yes, handle all things tooth-related. In fact, the red and white spiral of a barber's pole is a nod to this dual role: red for blood, white for bandages. Historians still argue how much training these barber surgeons actually had. Some apprenticed under others. A few studied old Roman texts or Arabic manuscripts passed down through monasteries, but most learned by doing. Pull enough teeth and you become the authority. You glance around the stall. There's no water, no soap, just a bucket of wine used for rinsing, numbing, and disinfecting in that order. You're not surprised. Sterilization won't be a concept for another few centuries. Infections are considered a risk of life, not poor hygiene. You watch one particularly grim session. A farmer sits down, stoic, He opens his mouth. The barber fits the pelican tool onto a molar and twists. There's a crunch, a shriek, a moment of silence. Then the farmer spits out something bloody and white onto the ground and stumbles away with a groan. He doesn't thank the barber, he just leaves. Someone else steps forward. And that's how it goes. One after another, all day. Teeth fall, blood spatters. The barber hums tunelessly while wiping his instruments with the same cloth he uses to dry his hands. You can't look away. Because despite the chaos, despite the pain, despite the certainty that this is not how medicine should work, it's working. People are desperate. They need help, and no one else is offering it. So you sit down, not for a pulling, just for a polish. The barber shrugs and gives you a flat stick with a bit of salt on it. Scrape around, he says. If it bleeds, rinse. And you do. Because in this world, where pain is constant and knowledge is patchy at best, even the sound of iron scraping tooth feels like progress. And sometimes, that's enough. You're back in the tavern, nursing a weak ale and chewing a stew-soaked hunk of bread, so slowly it could qualify as meditation. Your jaw still aches from yesterday's polish, but at least you're not bleeding into your soup. Progress, right? A man across the table raises his mug, leans over, and says with a wink, "Ever tried poppy wine for the pain?" You blink. He grins. Takes the edge off, or your whole head, depending how much you drink. And just like that, you've stepped into the world of medieval pain relief. Spoiler, it's an adventure. There's no Novocaine, no Tylenol, no topical gel you dab on your gums while watching reruns in bed. If you've got dental pain in the Middle Ages, and you do, it's either time to grit your teeth, or time to hit the bottle. Hard. Alcohol is the first, best and most accessible anesthetic. Not for numbing a specific spot. No one's inventing local anesthesia here, but for dulling your senses just enough that a barbaric extraction feels like something happening to someone else. Wine, ale, mead, and cider are standard issue. Not necessarily strong, but enough to fog your brain. For bigger jobs, people spike their drinks with medicinal herbs. Poppy, belladonna, hemlock, henbane and mandrake, each with sedative properties, and each carrying the small side effect of possibly killing you. You hear about a man who drank a pint of mandrake steeped in honey before his tooth was pulled. Didn't flinch. Didn't wake up for 3 days. They thought he died. When he finally stirred, he asked what day it was, and whether he still had his tooth. He didn't. That's the gamble. Relief is possible. But so is a coma. You try poppy wine for the first time that night. It's syrupy. Sweet. With a faint bitterness underneath, like dried flowers and something slightly medicinal. You sip, you feel warm. The ache in your gums ebbs just a little. Your vision fuzzes at the edges. You sit back and sigh for the first time in days. Now you understand why people swear by it. Of course, it's not without problems. Prolonged use leads to dependence. There are rumors of people who sip poppy wine from dawn until dusk. Numb, happy, useless. A blacksmith's apprentice was found muttering into a boot after drinking too much. No teeth, he'd say, over and over. You hope he was referring to himself. And the doses aren't exactly measured. One person's helpful draught is another's accidental death potion. The safest way is usually to take the herbs in food, baked into bread, steeped in broth, or infused in warm wine, and pray the village healer knows what she's doing. Other forms of pain relief include opium paste, applied directly to the gums. Doesn't taste great. Willow bark tea, an early aspirin stand-in, and clove oil, if you're wealthy enough to afford it. Cloves' numbing properties are surprisingly effective. Just don't get it in your eye. You did that once. It didn't go well. You also hear of more bizarre options. Henbane smoke, inhaled from a heated bowl, supposed to numb the body, mostly makes people fall over. Nightshade tincture, applied sparingly to the jawline. Sparingly, as in one drop won't kill you. Maybe. Valerian root chews, for calming nerves. Tastes like old socks, but helps you sleep through the worst. Historians still argue whether medieval folks truly understood how dangerous some of these substances were. Some texts warn of madness and shadows behind the eyes. Others recommend them casually, as if overdosing were just a Tuesday problem. You start keeping a mental chart. How much poppy is too much? How sleepy is normal? When do the worms in the ceiling stop being metaphors? Still, when the pain returns, and it always returns, you reach for your modest stash. Just a little poppy wine, just enough to sleep. Just enough to dull the fire behind your cheekbone. Because even in a world where pain is expected, where suffering is just part of daily life, people still crave relief. Even if it's temporary, even if it's risky. And so you sip, you smile faintly, you drift. And for a few quiet hours, your mouth isn't the loudest thing in the room. You're outside again, finally gathering herbs in the soft light of morning, when the miller's daughter walks past with the most startling grin you've seen in weeks. Her teeth, what's left of them, are black. Not dirty, not rotten, intentionally blackened, like polished obsidian set into her gums. You stare, she notices and shrugs. It's the fashion now, she says. You nod slowly, as if this explains everything. But inside, your brain is flipping tables. Because somehow, medieval tooth fashion has arrived. And it's complicated. See, while most people are quietly fighting their molars with vinegar and poppy wine, others, especially among the slightly wealthier classes, are doing something far stranger, embracing the weird state of their mouths as a statement, a style, a choice. In parts of Europe, and certainly farther east in Japan and Southeast Asia, blackened teeth are a symbol of beauty, elegance, and sometimes marital fidelity. Historians call this practice ohoguro in Japan, where noble women and later men used a lacquer made of iron filings and vinegar to dye their teeth black. It showed refinement, wealth, a cultivated appearance. And now, somehow, the idea has trickled westward. You ask the miller's daughter what she used. Walnut ink and soot, she says proudly. Boiled it 3 times, strained it through a rag, rubbed it on with a goose feather. You can still smell it on her breath, acrid and slightly nutty. To your surprise, it doesn't look terrible. It's striking, gothic, even. Other villagers begin to follow suit. Some blacken just a few teeth, usually the front ones, like little ornaments. Others go all in, crafting their own mixtures from ash, elderberry juice, and occasionally lamp oil. One nobleman visiting from the city claims to have stained his smile with ink blessed by a priest. No one's sure what that means, but he's got 10 fingers, 2 teeth, and a confidence that borders on reckless. At first you think it's all about vanity, but over time you realize something else. People are reclaiming control. If your teeth are falling out anyway, why not decide what they look like before they go? Why not make a statement? Why not own it? Even in decay, there is agency. Some go the opposite route, polishing their teeth to a shine with crushed chalk and lemon rind. One woman files hers into tiny points and says it makes her food tremble in fear. A little boy tries to dye his with berry juice and ends up with a mouthful of purple gums. He insists it's dragon breath. No one argues. And then there's you. You try a little walnut ink. Just on one tooth. It tingles, smells strange, makes your lips feel waxy. But when you glance in the mirror, it doesn't look wrong. It looks like defiance, like art, like you've declared to the world, yes, my mouth is a disaster, but I am the architect now. Tooth fashion becomes more than a trend. It's an identity. Married women blacken their teeth in solidarity with each other. Traveling performers paint silver stripes on theirs. A local priest files a cross into his top incisor and preaches about God's sign within. Children chew on beetroot and smile like devils. It spreads like a quiet revolution. And suddenly, the shame around tooth loss, rot, and pain softens a little. People stop hiding their mouths. They start decorating them, celebrating them, showing off gaps and gold caps and dyed molars like badges of survival. You think back to the beginning, huddled on a stool, mouth full of blood, afraid to speak. You remember the taste of rot, the burn of vinegar, the terrifying crack of bone, and now you smile, a little crooked, a little blackened, but it's yours. And in a world of pain and decay, that might be the most fashionable thing of all. You're half asleep on your mat, one rainy afternoon, listening to the gentle drip of water from the thatch above, when someone bangs on your door like the plague's returned. It's a shepherd, breathless and clutching something in a linen scrap. "You have to see this," he pants. He unwraps the bundle with shaking hands. Inside, a dead frog. You blink. It takes you a moment, but then you realize what this is. You've heard the whispers. You've seen the strange marks on people's cheeks. The frog isn't a meal or a joke. It's medicine. He's brought you a toothache cure by way of frog guts. "Wrap it round your neck," he says solemnly. "While it's warm, the pain will leave your mouth and settle in the frog." That's how it works. You blink again. He's not joking, and neither is the growing number of people in your village, and far beyond, who believe in the power of animal-based folk remedies. To modern minds it sounds absurd, but in your world, this is standard procedure. Welcome to the squelchy, slightly surreal realm of medieval sympathetic magic. The idea is simple and deeply weird, like attracts like. You're not just curing the body, you're tricking the sickness into leaving, by giving it somewhere else to go. A frog's cold, damp body is thought to pull infection, especially from hot ailments like gum inflammation. So people drape frogs across their cheeks, or sew them into little pouches worn at the neck. Or if they're really ambitious, crush the frog, smear the paste on the aching side of the face, and chant a short rhyme. No one agrees on the rhyme. Everyone agrees it smells horrific. You politely decline the shepherd's offer, and he seems only mildly disappointed. "Suit yourself," he says, tying the frog back up. "Worked for me. Only took 2 tries. There are, of course, other animal-based treatments. Some folks use mouse skulls, powdered and mixed with honey, to be rubbed on the gums. Supposedly, mice don't suffer toothaches. This is wildly untrue, and their tiny bones carry protective magic. Others swear by snail slime, dabbed directly onto sore gums to cool the heat. It's said to work best if you chant while the snail is still alive. You don't ask what the chant is. In the market, you overhear a merchant selling fox tooth charms, tiny pendants strung on sinew. Foxes never suffer decay, he insists. Too clever. He doesn't explain where he got the teeth, and you don't ask. You begin to notice more people walking around with strange amulets and lumps sewn into their collars, rabbit's feet, bird claws, dried beetles. You realize they're not just superstitions, they're diagnoses. A man with a frog on his neck, toothache. A woman wearing a necklace of pig teeth, swollen jaw. A child chewing clove-soaked linen with a bird feather tucked behind the ear. New molars coming in, and beneath it all, a deeper logic is at work. The mouth is mysterious, dangerous, and powerful. When it turns against you, you turn to magic. Sometimes, these remedies overlap with religious traditions. A tooth wrapped in cloth might be placed beside a relic. An animal charm might be blessed by a village priest who looks the other way and mutters, "Just in case." You've even seen people burying toad parts beneath the doorway while whispering a prayer to Saint Apollonia. Historians still argue how seriously people took these practices. Were they genuine beliefs? Cultural habits? Last-ditch efforts in the absence of alternatives? You think it's all of the above, because when your mouth hurts so badly you can't sleep, can't eat, can barely speak, you'll try anything, even frog guts. You still draw the line at toad slime, but you do let someone tie a thread of sheep's wool around your wrist to draw away the mouth poison. You leave it on. You don't believe in it, but you don't take it off. And maybe that's what all of this is. Hope dressed up in feathers and bones. A way to fight back when you've got no tools, no training, and a face full of agony. Maybe it doesn't need to make sense, because sometimes it's not about science. It's about surviving the night. It's been weeks since your last full-blown toothache. You're cautious, but cautiously hopeful. You rinse with salt water, scrub with charcoal paste, pray to Apollonia, chew your miswak stick after meals like it's sacred duty. You've even sewn a second tooth amulet into your sleeve, just in case. You think you're safe. Then the weaver's boy runs up to you in the square, mouth agape, eyes wild. He points at his sister, and there it is, the glint of wire. At first you think someone's mended her face with fence scraps, but no, those thin twisted threads are lashed directly across her teeth, from canine to canine, anchoring a wayward incisor into position. It looks deliberate. "New thing," the boy says breathlessly. She got it from the priest's cousin in the city. They're calling it braces. You lean in. He's not wrong. Somehow, the distant world of dental alignment has landed in your backyard, wrapped in sheep gut and raw optimism. And suddenly, your already complicated feelings about teeth have a new chapter. Medieval braces, if we can call them that, aren't widespread, but they do exist. Rarely. Strangely, inconsistently. You'd heard rumors of noble families hiring bone setters to straighten teeth for appearance sake, but you assumed it was nonsense. Now, it's strapped to someone's face. The design is rudimentary, threads of animal sinew looped around several teeth and cinched tightly with knots. The idea is to slowly pull misaligned teeth into better position, kind of like rearranging chairs by tying them together and hoping for the best. And yes, it's excruciating. The weaver's daughter can barely speak. Her lips are raw, her gums are bleeding, but her mother beams with pride. She'll smile like a duchess, she says. You're skeptical. Still, more people begin experimenting. Some use soft metal wire, others try strips of linen. One boy, known for making slingshots out of everything, ties his two front teeth together with fish gut and spends the next week unable to eat anything firmer than porridge. A merchant passing through town boasts that in Paris, certain physicians are using tiny gold wires to bind loose teeth to their neighbors, or tighten crooked fangs. The technique, he claims, is based on ancient Roman methods. You've heard of these references. Roman scholar Celsus once described repositioning teeth with finger pressure over time. But this is the medieval remix. Historians now believe these early braces were more cosmetic than medical. But in a world where every smile is a battleground of rotten reputation, appearance matters. Having teeth that look aligned, even if they're cracked, discolored, or barely hanging on, can mean the difference between respect and ridicule. Still, results are mixed. One woman's wire snaps and slices through her gums. A blacksmith tries copper wire and ends up with a mouthful of green-tinted teeth. A nobleman reportedly glued his front teeth into place with tree resin. He later sneezed them out during a sermon. Function aside, the idea of medieval braces catches on. People start marking their faces with dots to indicate where wires might go. They sketch tooth alignment dreams in the margins of prayer books. A monk in a nearby abbey writes a treatise on correcting the crookedness of speech through divine threadwork. You don't know what that means, but it sounds expensive. Eventually, you try a version yourself. Not because your teeth are crooked at this point, crooked is charming, but because one loose molar keeps shifting around like it's thinking of moving out. You bind it to the one next door with a strip of waxed linen soaked in clove oil. It hurts. It pinches. You leave it in overnight and wake up with the taste of regret and blood. But the tooth stays in place. For now, you start seeing smiles differently. Not just in terms of rut and gaps, but shape. People compare smiles like tailors compare stitches. Her teeth run straight as fence posts, someone says. Another man brags that his daughter's grin could line a parchment edge, a new beauty standard born from desperation and ingenuity. And while it's mostly a mess of strings, wires, and swollen gums, it's hopeful. It says, we can still fix this, even now. And somehow that's more powerful than any paste, potion, or prayer. You're back at the shrine of Saint Apollonia, watching a familiar ritual unfold. A woman kneels in front of the makeshift altar, clutching something wrapped in cloth. She's murmuring a prayer, lips trembling. When she's finished, she opens the bundle and places its contents carefully among the others. It's a tooth, a real one, still bloody at the root. You glance at the growing pile. There are dozens of them now, molars, canines, fragments of incisors, all lined up like offerings at the gates of some obscure dental deity. And in a way, that's exactly what they are, because tooth relics are having a moment. Not just offerings, sacred objects. Bits of the body imbued with meaning, traded, sold, even venerated. And you're starting to realize your community is just one pocket in a larger medieval obsession with collecting, preserving, and sometimes monetizing human teeth. In more religious regions, people seek relics of the saints, not fingers or bones this time, but teeth. A molar from Saint Apollonia, a piece of jawbone from Saint Denis. These aren't just devotional items, they're believed to heal. Just touching them might stop your toothache, kissing the reliquary might prevent another one. Of course, you've never seen a real saint's tooth, but you have seen what people think are saintly teeth, sold in markets from Rome to York. And if there are that many floating around, well, the math gets suspicious. You suspect that some of them might be from less than holy sources, like graveyards, or even fellow villagers. There's an underground market, and it's growing. You hear about it first from a traveling friar who stops to rest in your village. Over bread and broth, he admits off the record that people are selling teeth to collectors and clergy alike. Some want them for healing, he says. Others just like to have them. You nod slowly, not sure which is more disturbing. And it's not just religious. Tooth auctions are becoming a thing. In big towns, barbers and apothecaries buy fresh teeth from the poor, especially the young. Healthy molars and incisors fetch the highest price. They're used in transplants for the wealthy, or polished and displayed in cases like pearls. Yes, people are displaying them. There's a noblewoman in London said to have a necklace strung with 24 teeth, each from a different donor. A necklace of youth, she calls it. You don't know whether to be horrified or impressed. Closer to home, a merchant comes through claiming he carries a fragment of King Edward's own jawbone. He says it hums when held over fire. People pay to touch it. He leaves town with a full purse and a very suspicious grin. There are others who treat teeth like talismans. One boy carries his grandfather's tooth on a leather cord. A baker swears by a lucky molar in her apron pocket, rubbed before every loaf. You've even heard of a priest who buried his own extracted canine in the church floor to bind his sermons to heaven. The uses range from sacred to silly, and yet, everyone treats them with a strange kind of reverence. You start to wonder about your own lost teeth. The ones you buried, the ones you burned, the ones still stitched into your tunic, resting quietly against your hip like a secret. What if someone found it? What would they say? What would they do? It's not just about superstition, it's about memory, legacy, power. Teeth outlast flesh. They survive fire, rot, and time. They remain. So people collect them, cherish them, trade them, claim them as fragments of something bigger, something sacred, even if it started in a mouthful of rot. And maybe that's why the woman at the shrine cries as she leaves her offering, not just from pain or devotion, but from the strange mix of loss and permanence. That tooth is gone from her body, but now it's part of something larger. You look down at your own smile in a shard of metal mirror, gappy, jagged, tired, but still yours. For now, it's a cold morning, the kind that seeps into your bones and makes your joints creak like old floorboards. You're trying to eat a slice of tough rye bread, gnawing at it like a reluctant squirrel, when your last upper incisor decides it's had enough. It slips free without warning, just falls out. No fanfare, no pain. You hold it in your hand, staring at the small, weathered thing that once helped you bite into apples and tear salted pork. And suddenly, it hits you. You're almost out of teeth. There's no dramatic gasp, no violin swell, just a quiet, strange panic, like your face is slowly collapsing from the inside out. You spit out the rest of your bread and sit in silence, tooth in hand, wondering what this means for you. In your world, toothlessness is more than physical, it's social, it's symbolic. Losing teeth means losing status. Sure, everyone expects to lose a few, but when your smile becomes mostly gum, when your words start to whistle and your food has to be boiled beyond recognition, that's when people start looking at you differently. Suddenly, you're old, even if your bones say otherwise. You're sickly, even if you can still lift a bucket of water. You're cursed, unclean, wasted. In some towns, being toothless marks you as poor, unable to afford help, healing, or even the illusion of care. In others, it's worse. Gaps in your smile are seen as omens, signs of sin or bad blood. A mouth without teeth, they say, is a mouth that lied too often. You don't remember lying, but people still start talking softer around you. Even your posture changes. You keep your head down. You talk with your hand near your mouth. You smile less. Laugh quietly. You avoid hard food altogether. Soup becomes a lifestyle. And forget meat, unless it's stewed for 2 days and mashed into pulp. You visit the barber to ask about options. He gives you a look somewhere between pity and practicality. You've got enough left to anchor one more plate, he says. He's talking about a dental plate, a primitive denture made from wood, ivory, or bone, shaped to resemble teeth and lashed to what remains of your real ones, with wire or wax. Not to chew with, just to show off. Can't eat with it, he adds. But you'll look less empty. You nod. He starts working. The plate is made from smooth animal bone. He carves 2 notches, paints on dots of soot for natural color, and fits it to your gums with warm beeswax and 2 small loops of wire anchored around your surviving molars. It barely fits. It makes your jaw ache. You lisp like a drunk friar. But when you smile in the mirror, you look, just for a moment, like yourself. It's a strange kind of vanity. You know this isn't a cure. You know the rot is still there, the gums still receding, the jaw still thinning with age and infection. But the illusion matters, because losing your teeth isn't just an inconvenience, it's a loss of voice. People with full mouths speak clearly, command attention. Toothless mouths slur, whistle, mumble. You've seen elders ignored mid-sentence. You've seen a merchant fired because customers couldn't understand him anymore. You've seen friends disappear into quiet corners, chewing broth-soaked bread and avoiding eye contact. So you wear the plate, not always, just in public. You practice speaking again. Apples, you say. Barley, blessings. The words land strangely, but they land. You try a soft joke in the tavern, and someone actually laughs. You start smiling more, only when you remember the plate is in. And slowly, people look at you the way they used to. Not with awe, not even with pity. Just like you belong again. It shouldn't matter, but it does. You're sitting on a rickety bench in the back corner of the chapel, quietly observing as the priest mutters something over a basin of herbs. The chapel smells like wax and wilted lilies, and the afternoon light slices through the stained glass window in long ribbons of red and blue. He's not alone. Several parishioners have gathered, forming a small half-circle. They're not praying for the harvest or for rain. They're here to pray for their mouths, or more precisely, for what's missing in them. The topic today? The beauty of silence and modesty, says the priest. But everyone knows he means teeth. You watch as one woman crosses herself, lips pressed tight, eyes focused on the icon at the altar. She's recently lost her front teeth. You've noticed she doesn't speak much anymore. And suddenly, you start noticing everywhere how the absence of teeth affects more than just eating. It affects expression, communication, confidence, identity, and it's reflected in art. You start thinking about the images that surround you, the way mouths are depicted in paintings, murals, woodcuts, and tapestries. Nearly every face you've seen in medieval art wears a flat, demure smile, lips closed, teeth hidden, expressions subdued. At first, you assumed it was modesty, or maybe the artistic style of the time, but now you realize it's probably intentional. Teeth aren't just private, they're controversial. People with beautiful teeth are sometimes seen as vain, prideful, dangerously attractive. People with gapped or crooked teeth, pitted, mocked, accused, and toothlessness, especially among women, is considered a kind of moral failing, as if your mouth rotted because of some sin you let in. You remember one painting in the manor house of a noble woman smiling just faintly, lips drawn tight, skin glowing, no hint of teeth. The caption called her blessed in silence. A maid whispered once that the woman had lost most of her teeth from sugar and shame. You begin to notice how portraits of saints and nobles avoid any hint of the messiness of real mouths. Open-mouthed expressions are reserved for demons and drunkards. Laughter is unholy. Big smiles? A rarity. Historians still debate whether this was stylistic restraint or something deeper, a collective discomfort with the raw, fleshy truth of what a mouth reveals. And yet, you've seen real faces. Villagers with crooked grins and stained molars. Merchants with teeth like misaligned dice. Lovers laughing with their mouths wide open, despite the gaps. Those smiles, those flawed, honest, living smiles, never make it into the records. But they exist. Your own smile. It's changed. The wooden plate helps, but it's not you. It hides the truth more than it restores it. You catch yourself using it like a mask. At church, at the tavern, around strangers, but alone. You remove it. You touch the worn places where teeth used to be. You practice talking without shame. Because this mouth worn, wounded, reshaped, is still yours. And maybe the world will never celebrate it in paint or stone. But it's the one that carried your voice through every prayer plea and poorly chewed meal. You smile lopsided and half-gummed, and whisper, "Still here," because beauty may be painted, but survival is lived. And your mouth has lived. It happens just before dawn. You're woken by the slow, aching pulse of your jaw, an old pain, familiar now, almost nostalgic in its persistence. You sit up, press a palm to your face, and exhale through your nose. It's not agony, not this time, just a quiet reminder that your mouth, your poor, battered mouth, still isn't done. You shuffle over to the basin, rinse, spit, a little blood, a little yellow. You nod like an old friend has come to visit. There's a sort of resignation that settles in after a lifetime of toothaches, extractions, poultices, prayers, and every charlatan remedy under the sun. You've burned worms out, tied frogs to your face, prayed to saints and chewed sticks until your gums went numb. You've used soot as paste and bone as tooth. You've slept with your mouth wrapped in linen, hoped your tongue wouldn't swell, and accepted that sometimes your molars hum like tiny devils trapped under enamel. But through it all, you've kept going. That's the real miracle. Because now, in this moment of dull throbbing and early light, you realize the truth. You survived. You didn't emerge untouched, no one does. You've got gaps, scars, a jaw that clicks when the weather changes, and breath that still sometimes smells like old mead. But your voice still works. Your words still land. You still smile, even if crookedly. And that's no small thing. You think back to everyone who helped you get here. Old Joran with his rusted tools, Mother Elga and her terrifying pastes, the priest who never judged your tooth amulets, the blacksmith's apprentice who carved your first false molar, saints, sinners and strangers, all united by a common struggle, mouth versus world. You walk outside. The village is quiet. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys. A dog barks in the distance. Somewhere, someone is probably tying a frog to their chin again. You grin, because you've been through the worst a medieval mouth can offer, and you're still standing, still talking, still chewing carefully. And yes, you'd regret visiting a medieval dentist. Anyone would. But in your own strange, aching way, you've become one. A survivor of centuries' worth of pain, folklore, and grit. And when your last tooth finally drops into your palm like a polished stone from a riverbed, you'll just nod again and carry on. Now, as your eyes grow heavy and the candlelight flickers softer, let's take one last breath together. Slow, through the nose, out through the mouth. You've traveled a long, painful road tonight. Not just through the corridors of medieval medicine, but through the quieter spaces between the places where resilience and desperation intertwine. You've sat on blood-stained stools, worn jaw straps made of wool, and whispered prayers into wood smoke, all in the name of holding your smile together just a little bit longer. And yet, through every crooked tooth, every herbal rinse, every plier-wielding barber with bad breath and worse intentions, you endured. Maybe not intact, but still very much you. So now, let the pain fade. Let the tools fall silent. The smoky little room, the candle-lit chapel, the bitter mouthwash, and cracked molars, they're behind you now. You don't need to clench your jaw anymore. You don't need to brace for the next sting. There's nothing sharp here, nothing left to pull. Just softness, quiet, stillness. Your breath is steady. Your face relaxes. Even your tongue settles into place. No longer probing empty sockets, no longer wary. You are safe. And if perhaps some part of you still echoes with the story you've just lived, if your dreams tonight are haunted by pliers, or holy teeth, or faint whispers of Apollonia, know that you are among friends. Every mouth that ever suffered in silence, understand, rest now. The pain is gone, and so are the teeth.